Hey, welcome back to the podcast, Richard. Great to have you as always.
Thank
It's
you.
been a little while since we last filmed. The first podcast we did was May 23. Here we are today on the 2nd of the 1st, 2025. How's everything, Richard?
It's great. We had a great holiday, my wife and I, and we're ready to get started in the new year.
Awesome, cool, cool. I've had so much interest from people, and it's a no-brainer that you don't need me to introduce you to the world, but if I can do my part to help facilitate more people, hearing about you and your lessons and all of that good stuff, then yeah, I really appreciate you coming on to do that.
Absolutely,
Um,
my pleasure.
the only trick is there's so many questions. Like I wouldn't even know which one to ask you first. So I remember last time we were speaking about, um, we spoke about your venture from going into pretty much starting your own church, moving away, and people from the church coming to see you. You started your own groups and all that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Not really
yes.
having any support network, you had to create your own, which incredible. So I guess a good question to lead on from there would be, I guess it for the viewers to see it in order to a degree. How after a few years of doing that, what direction did you decide to take it in? Did you just keep it at a certain level, or did you want it to grow, or did it inspire you to go elsewhere, or what did that look like?
So we started out with actually a few couples, married couples who started attending my studies in my home, and gradually over time, it's the first name that we had for the organization was the Center for Contemplative Christianity. But as time went on, and this process went on for about 10 or 15 years, it grew kind of organically and naturally. We didn't try to recruit people, but people would hear about us or they would have a friend that used to attend or you did attend. And so our numbers grew to usually about 50 or 60 people would attend the classes. I gave studies every Sunday night for 10 or 12 years. I led 3 or 4 retreats each year, meditation retreats. And so the numbers kind of gradually grew, but we eventually changed the name to the Center for Contemplative Living. And the reason we did that was because we began to realize as we studied the mystics of other traditions, that the perennial philosophy or the truth that's kind of at the core of every religious tradition is the same truth. It's the same living water, if you will. And what I always kid about the fact that too many times religions move away from what their founder discovered, and they instead of drinking the living water for themselves, they start arguing over water rights. And so we wanted to get away from being identified solely as a Christian organization and incorporate that perennial philosophy, understanding that there's truth to be had in every tradition. And as we did that, our numbers even increased more after that.
Awesome. And that's one thing, actually. Let me just turn this off. Hopefully, that's not. All right, cool. Um, yeah, I remember speaking to you about this, and the retreats you normally did, they were Vipassana, were they typically 3 days, or were they 10 days, or?
No, I never did 10 day. I sat 10-day retreats, but I never led 10-day retreats. Um, we used to do 3-day retreats, Friday, Saturday through Sunday. And some of the retreats were done in silence, like is traditional with Vipassana. And some of them we would have presentations, 2 or 3 presentations during each day on a variety of topics related to meditation. So it was a variety of things. And some retreats we did, meditation was kind of an adjunct. Um, like I did a whole meditation retreat one time on movies. We would watch a movie and then we together, and then we would hold a spiritual discussion about what we thought the themes were and how they related to each of our journeys and stuff like that. So we had a pretty wide variety of things that we studied and that we talked about on these retreats.
Awesome. And one thing that always kind of puzzled me about a lot of Vipassana teachers or teachings, with no disrespect, is like they don't have to be 10 days, do they? Once you've learnt the techniques, right? Is that
No, they
true?
don't have to be. 10-day retreats are a good way to kind of immerse yourself in the meditation practice because you're meditating, 12, 14 hours a day. Um, and if you're going to be serious about meditation, I recommend everybody do a 10-day retreat at least once during their practice. More often if you can afford it or you can. But I think a 3-day retreat, just sitting with other people in meditation, is a powerful experience. It's one thing to sit by yourself. I think that's invaluable. But when you do it in a group of like minded folks, there's a kind of group energy that I think is created that helps you go even deeper in your focus and concentration.
Would that be, again, I guess using the term loosely? There's another phrase I got from you that I use all the time, using the term loosely. But would it be fair to say like it's essentially like collective consciousness when you do it together?
I think that's probably exactly what it is, or collective energy. I'm not sure. Consciousness, of course, is energy. So I think so. I think when you are in a group of like-minded folks doing a practice together, there's an energy or a consciousness accessed that perhaps you wouldn't access just on your own, in a deeper way, at least.
And I don't know why this has crept up. I guess I want to be just for people watching here. Like, yeah, I know I always credit you as my main teacher because you have been. But I want people to, I guess, when they watch my channel, for me to not just come across like I'm preaching like I've got it all figured out because I clearly don't,
Hmm.
right? But in my journey with you, was there anything that you saw in me that was a blind spot that I wasn't aware of? That, is there anything that ever comes to mind? And this is just a, you will not offend me here. And if you don't want to answer that, that's
Absolutely.
cool. But
I don't remember how far into our journey together we were, but at some point I began to suspect that you had arrived at an area of awareness where it was time for you to move out into the world again. And you were spending a tremendous amount of time isolated and in meditation, which is all good. It's great. But you were living like a monk. And
yeah,
I got the sense that it was time for you to move out of the cloister and begin to share what you had experienced and what you had learned with other people in pain. And I was gratified to see you do that. I was gratified to see how quickly you said, "I'll, I agree. I take that challenge. I'm going to do that."
I it's hard to like when you hear a truth like that and when it's a profound truth wherever it's delivered from, it's kind of hard to contest it if you're open to that type of thing, right? And to me it was just another, it was the next in that sequence for me. But I still have to admit, like propane can attest to this as well. I went to do the thing, but I've still been really cautious in how much I share, and
Mm-hmm.
up until very
Mm-hmm.
recently I've still held back on the deeper aspects of things and call it my last ego attachments, because I knew, once I went all in, there was no going back. Because in
Right.
my own journey, it's almost easier to go fully in with the thing. But then when you're going to share such a profound truth with other people, wow. Yeah, I guess I have to admit, yeah, I did hold back there. I was very select in what I shared, and it was very top funnel, if you will. Whereas now I really want to go into the real depths of it. Um,
You know, I
is
don't,
that
I
something
don't,
people would commonly? Go ahead, sorry.
I was just thinking, I don't see that so much as the remnants of ego attachment as I do why wisdom or discernment. Because the truth is that not everybody wants to hear this or can hear this or can appropriate this when they hear it. And so, in my estimate, being a good teacher, if you will, is having an exquisite sense of timing, of knowing how much of that truth people are ready to hear and are ready to incorporate into their lives. Otherwise, it's kind of like Jesus said, you're casting pearls before swine. That's not, not that they're swine, but that they're not
Yeah,
able to appropriate the
yeah.
pearls of wisdom you might want to share.
Right.
What's a much better approach in my mind is to start out approaching them or dealing with them at the level of their pain, at the level of their suffering, and offer what you can to that. And if eventually along that journey you can say to them in so many words, you know what? Probably the source of a great deal of your pain and suffering is internal. Would you like to take a look at that? And they'll either say yes or no, and you can tell by their response whether they're ready to hear anymore.
Yeah, yeah, it really does make a lot of sense. And like it was quite bizarre because I felt so confident in well versed in these things. And then it was like, right now here's the opportunity to go and tell the world, loosely put. And all of a sudden I don't this mind identification crept in or whatever, or but it was just all of a sudden it didn't feel daunting, but I guess I couldn't find my reason or my inspiration, or I was talking myself out of, oh, people aren't going to hear this anyway, so what's the point? Or there was just, it seemed multifaceted with all of those, and I couldn't quite put my finger um, on any of it. So I guess I just needed to stew in that for a while as well. Maybe that was my next
Yeah.
stage.
And I think it's really important too that we realize that we can't save anybody. We can't, we can share what we've experienced. That's probably the limits of what we can do. So I always used to say back in my more Orthodox Christian days, any mission you undertake for God is a mission directly away from God. So this idea that I have something I can teach other people, I think that's a slippery slope. We have to be very careful about that and remind ourselves that we're not doing anything. Consciousness is doing something through us, and we get to watch that happen. And that's a blessing. That's a wonderful experience. I know that for years as a psychotherapist, my mantra between sessions has always been not from me, but through me. Not from me, but through me. And that helps, I think, keep me in perspective of I'm not giving away anything. I'm allowing myself to be used as a vessel. And in fact, the better vessel you are, the less of you that's involved,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's
Which is the irony or the paradox of this whole process that we're talking about.
that again. Like when I'm sitting down to do the videos now that I've had some time to stew on it and expand whatever into the thing, yeah, like when I sit down to create a video now and it's from that perspective, it's really fun and it's free and it's flowing and it's like those answers, yeah, they do come from somewhere so far greater than myself. But I guess I was trying to sit down and do it as Johnny, and that was the problem.
Yeah, because you don't know, and at least in the beginning, we don't know any other way to do it except from personal consciousness. But as we learn to kind of tune into source, what I like to call source consciousness, um, we begin to realize that we can get in the way of it. We can even block it. But what we can't do what it does. It's being done through us. And that is trippy. I'm an old hippie, so forgive my language, but that's trippy.
Don't worry, like I get called hippie on a regular, so most people watching this will be very attuned to that anyway. No, no, it's
Well,
good.
there you go. There you
Yeah,
go.
yeah, whatever I needed to go through, it can only happen one way anyway, can't it? Right?
Exactly.
To get there. But yeah,
Exactly.
it does make sense now as to why, because I don't think I was whatever in a place, or maybe didn't have enough space to allow that thing to flow through at the level I now want to speak about it at. Even though I know this isn't a level or stage thing, but in the depths and the intricacies and the things beyond your initial awakening and all that kind of stuff, like
Right.
the real cosmic beauty, if you will. That's what I now want to share more of. And yeah, those were the bits that I'd really, I guess, yeah, just got in my own way with. But yeah, very humbling every time when you once
And
again surrender and realize that.
well, that's the word right there, isn't it? And it's an ongoing process. It's not something you get to do once and for all. It's something that we remind ourselves of constantly. Let go, surrender, let it flow through you until there's no you there for the flow to
Yeah,
interrupt. It's like the ego or the human personality too oftentimes is like a restriction of the circuit. It's almost like you put something in the circuit that interferes with the signal.
Yeah.
And when that's pulled away, when that's ceases to be, let's say, for at least a moment, then that circuit flows freely.
Yeah.
That's a terrible metaphor, but it's the best one I can think of at the
Yeah,
moment.
yeah, and
Um,
and that mofo will evolve with you, right?
yeah, exactly,
Mine
exactly.
certainly does anyway. But like, one thing, and this is it of all the undeniable truths, like the non-dual guys, the religious speaking, all of the other, like if anyone gave this, like your interpretation that I've been on that path, that thing, when everything is stripped away, if anyone truly gave this thing a chance, then it would be undeniable. The only reason ever people would ever contest it is because they won't see it through, right? Or they haven't seen it
Yeah,
through. And
yeah,
usually to me, and I know everyone can kind of say that from their perspective, but anyone who seems to truly do the thing, there's no argument in the thing. It's the
no,
exact same thing every time.
yeah. And that's why people, let's say two people meet and they've both experienced what we're talking about, they can see that in each other. They don't even have to say a word and they can recognize it. But this is something that intellectual knowledge won't get you. It just doesn't get you there. Now, I'm not one of those people that says the mind is a problem and we got to get rid of that. I have a PhD in psychology, for crying out loud. I believe in education. I believe in informing ourselves and getting knowledge and doing the best we can with that. But I also know there's another way to know, and
Yeah,
that way is what we're talking about here today. And until you have engaged the practice that
yeah,
may lead, and there are many of them, but until you've engaged the practice and had that experience yourself, you're just going to argue about it in your brain. And
yeah,
you're going to have intellectual discussions about it with other people, but you're kind of missing the point. And it's kind of like this old, those who know simply know. And there's no arrogance in that. There's no sense of accomplishment in that. I feel lucky as hell that I know that. I don't know why I know it. I just feel lucky that I do. And I just want to share that in any way that I can with other people.
yeah. I mean, yeah, it's nothing but wonder. But when you go back to that, like, it cannot be conceptualized, can you? That's why in the beginning, the self help books are great. It has to be thought about first in the mind, doesn't it, for it to begin? That's
Yes,
where all
absolutely.
curiosity starts. But there's only so far you can go. And another thing relating back to that truth is, I got to a point where whose ever book I read, or whichever truth I was trying to discover, they were all saying the same thing. So in the end,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying don't read these things, but it's like, yeah, they're just another distraction, aren't they? You you can only get so many reminders of the truth before you're just distracting yourself from actually living it, right?
Yeah, and I was caught up in that cycle for a long time. I've probably read hundreds of books in different traditions. Um, but until I incorporated meditation into my practice, into my life, it was all head knowledge. It was all intellectual knowledge. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think it should be seen as a beginning, not an ending. It's a beginning of the process. It's not the end of the process. And until you, in my case, sit down on the cushion, be quiet and shut your mouth.
Yeah,
I used to kid with people and go, sit down, shut up, and pay attention.
yeah.
That's all that's required.
Amen to that, right? And like, because one thing I've noticed is like, if you change your name or you're growing a beard or you need music or like tools, bells, whistles, all of that shit, no. Like, what this really is, the crystal clear, in my humble perspective, whatever, the crystal clear, sharp consciousness that comes, that expansive awareness is when everything is stripped away.
Mm-hmm.
Everything, right? There's no performance or display of the thing whatsoever. So
Yes.
oftentimes, the people who are actually living it and talking about it, they're so, shall we say, quietly spoken in that field. Not always, but
Yes.
a lot of the time,
Yes.
because there's like no egoic or whatever, like mind identified things that will make someone look at it and be like, ooh, that's pretty. People don't pick it up, do they? Like, yeah. It's when everything's stripped bare. Most people aren't willing to do that. They won't put the toys down. They won't put the books down. They won't put the
And
music down and all that shit.
you're absolutely correct. And that's essential along the way. But it can go in stages. Like, like I said, I was dependent on reading for years. Then I was meditating, but in my meditation, I would have music in the background, or I would use a bell to start and end my meditation period. So I had toys that I was
Yeah.
still attached to. But the further along in that process I went, those things seemed to me to be, I didn't like them anymore. They were a distraction. I would just sit down, be quiet, and pay attention, and usually starting with the breath. But I don't chastise people who use toys in their spiritual practice because that's where they are at the moment and that's what they might need. But I do hope to eventually get to the place where they can let that all go.
Yeah, and that's why, like, again, I want to second that because I do talk about that sometimes, and it can look like I'm just being a prick, like I'm insulting people's beliefs or something, and it's like it's really not that. It isn't. And I fell hard into the new age thing. I did. I still like binaural beats. I still like mantras, all that kind of thing. They do serve a purpose, but yeah, the deepest meditation is when all of that is stripped away. And yes, you do need things to help you get there, but you will not have the profoundest, I don't think, expansive realizations and journey into oneness, whatever, unless you're willing to strip all of that away. Because
Yes,
eventually you need to put it down. And those people, I don't think, that they get stuck in an identity with those things, don't they? And if you can't
yes,
put that down, you're never going to go beyond that thing. And they won't trust the process to do that. So when you're speaking of this to them, I've just created my version of what they're doing in their eyes.
hmm,
But yeah, it's like I think anyone, if you tried it, like yeah, it's about nothingness, right? Full surrender is nothingness with no thing.
it's like being stripped naked. Um, Beginning first of all with the accoutrements of your practice, and then being stripped naked in the mind of all concepts and all beliefs, and simply sitting in being itself. And that takes practice. That takes a while. But when you are there, it is utterly transformative, utterly transformative. And when you have experienced that, I mean, deeply experienced that, what I call that is learning the address of that place. It's a place in consciousness that you can then go back to very quickly or in the midst of any activity. And so that life itself becomes your meditation.
Yes, yeah. And for me, when I'm trying to explain a lot of those things, I can't tell you what it. Speaking just generally here, like I can't tell you what it is. It's easier to tell you what it isn't because
Yes.
usually people that think they know what it is when the thing they're doing clearly isn't it. So like if you're at a point where you have any attachment to a thing, it's probably not the thing, right?
Right. Exactly. It's kind of like the old saying, if you understand anything that you say that you understand God means that's not the God. Anything you understand isn't really the essence of the truth of it. And that's why we always say that truth is found in silence. And not just silence of the body by sitting still on a cushion, but silence of the mind. Now, the mind is never truly silent, but we can come to that place where we step back from that stream of thought and be the observer of it. And that's the beginning of wisdom.
This is, and again, I don't want to keep you for too much longer. Could I just pick up one more thing? With that,
Yeah.
is that okay? Thank you. And then just because I know, like, so many people will benefit from this, I think. The non-dual guys, I find them really fascinating, and they do speak so much truth, but it's quite hard to put a finger on, like the experience they talk about living. Sometimes it feels or sounds very far away from actually living deeply in a human existence. And to me, awakening, it's all about going up there, getting all of that good stuff, and coming back into the body to be as raw in human form as possible, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And
And it's like being a shaman. You know, the shaman leaves the tribe and goes into the spirit world and then comes back with a blessing for the people.
the non-dual guys seem to stay in this cosmic place, though, that like dances on the edge of both, but never. And I know that's, I get it, that's non-duality, but I wonder why some people choose to stay there when they think that's the complete answer. But here we are, and non-duality doesn't do it for me. Not as my all-time thing, because it can be a very cold, non-human place.
Yes. It can become nihilistic, is what it, if one of the things that you'll hear too many times in non-dual circles is, what are you worried about? You don't even exist. You don't exist. So why are you worried about pain, or why are you worried about helping other people? It's all an illusion. It's a dream world. That's true. On some level, that is true. But on another level, it's just nihilistic. It's just basically, I think, a cop out to being intimately involved with life. And isn't that what we've been given? We've been given life. We've been given existence. I think the more intimately we can be involved with that, the better.
I agree. And I think once you turn into all of that pain, it's better than pretending there is no pain. And that is what fortifies you to be able to allow all of that pain to flow through you. Like,
Yes,
that's the thing that made me bulletproof in most scenarios, was honoring all of that. And it does get to
yes,
a point where life isn't painless, but like, there's no stumbling blocks with whatever emotions come ever. I can't get that with non-duality. I need to be deeply feeling every fucking thing.
I agree. I am the same way. And, this division
Yeah.
has existed from the beginning of time between those folks who have a strong intellectual understanding and those folks who have lived it in their individual daily life. And that's just two different categories of spirituality, I suppose. But we choose the one that, well, I'm not sure how much choice is involved, but we gravitate towards the one that fits us in terms of our personality, in terms of our life experience. And that's where we ought to be. But too many times, religious insight or spiritual insight gets turned into theology. And so we'll take the truth of a Christ or a Muhammad or a Buddha, and we'll systematize it into some kind of intellectual theology. But that isn't the point of what they were trying to teach us. They were trying to get us to engage the practice that they engaged so that we could experience what they experienced, so that we could drink that living water for ourselves.
Do you think maybe non-duality is like, let's say the dark night of the soul? People have no choice when they get stuck there, but non-duality is maybe the exact opposite, and it's like, oh, I can choose to stay here because it feels so damn fucking good. Like Ken Wilber says, it's easy to stay there, right?
Yes. Yeah, it is easy. It's easier,
Well,
I
yeah, yeah,
suppose, to
yeah,
stay there.
yeah.
Um, and you probably don't even know what you're missing, unless you talk to somebody else who's got a deep practice that can share with you what their experience is. But yeah, I don't want to make non-duality the bad guy. I just think
No, no.
any, any philosophic position can be misleading unless it's accompanied by a strong practice of spiritual insight and depth.
Thank you so much, Richard. And yeah, like for everybody watching, yeah, we're not chastising anything here. We're just putting it under the microscope. What I'm doing is for the viewers and for my own learning, gratefully, is getting Richard's views on things from his experience. So anything you see or watch or hear here isn't to offend anybody's beliefs. We're just dissecting things, and feel free to drop a comment. Let us know what your thoughts are. Richard, thank you so much for your time.
You're
It's
welcome.
really
My pleasure.
appreciated.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Johnny.
I'll see you soon.
All right.